All right, well, here we are. This is the debut for the church gargoyle. I have the wonderful Thaddeus Kaczynski with me for all 5 of my subscribers, which I think Thaddeus is one. So, yeah, Thad, I just obviously we go back, we have a little bit of a history, and boy, you were kind of an intellectual father to me once upon a time, and at turns. I went through some crises back in the day, and you were a man that you were there really as more than a friend than anything, not just a mentor. And I look upon that really, those were formative days and years for me. But I just we don't have to dig up those corpses and take those skeletons out of the closet. But I just wanted to. Yeah, just wanted to just been reminiscing, and just wanted you to be the kind of the guest of honor here on the first stab at a podcast, which I've never done this before, so might be a little on the clunky side, but
No, reminiscing is good. I like to reminisce with people I don't know.
You don't know?
Yeah, that's my favorite.
Well, I mean, it's been a while since we've talked. When was the? Well,
I know
I
you, but I'm just saying I enjoy reminiscing with people that I don't know. It's a pretty cool activity.
Yeah. Well, how you doing? I guess that would be the first.
You didn't get the joke. You didn't get the joke at all.
No, I didn't. No. You completely went over me.
Oh, okay.
Are you referencing something? Is that a reference to something?
It's just a joke. It's
okay.
It's a Steve Wright joke.
Oh, comedian. Steve Wright. Yeah. The guy with the was it the what was the Christmas ornament one with on the toilet or whatever? I can't remember the Christmas wreath.
I don't know that one. I don't know
something about the Christmas wreath on the toilet, but yeah.
I'm doing all right. Yeah, doing fine.
Yeah, still in California.
Yeah, just doing some teaching, some writing, and just trying to make sense of everything that's happening and figure out how to act as usual in this unprecedented situation we're in.
Yeah, no, I think all our sense-making machines are kind of broken to one degree or another, and we're just sort of trying to assemble the various pieces and make the car move again. Make the cerebral car move again. So, I mean, I guess we might as well just jump into your piece here, which you wrote. I think it was Catholicism as Ideology. I think that was the title.
Mm-hmm.
Which was just kind of laying out the Scylla and Charybdis that we're all kind of trying to navigate through here right now. But very much just about the two sort of twin dragons that are eating the either side of the church, one the progressivism and one the radical traditionalism.
That's 2 of them, and you've also got some others, and we're definitely not united at all. The progressivists and the radical trads are pretty much just out of the church, obviously, and so they're kind of lost. I mean, the sedes and those who just refuse to accept the church since Vatican II in any way, and the progressivists who really have a counterfeit modernist and ideological faith. They're almost like fifth column in the church, and they're hell bent on changing everything to fit the world. So those 2 radical elements are kind of lost. So there's no reason to really talk about them too much.
Maybe we could just back up the conversation for a second here. I mean, do you think? I mean, I think the Francis regime, I mean, has very much been kind of the agent provocateur for this, these seismic, this grinding of the tectonic plates in the Catholic world. Do you see? I mean, without Francis, do you think? I mean, I don't think it would be near the volatility, near the rancor, near the. I mean, it seems like he's I would say he's the primary cause, and two, I mean, I think the internet. I mean, obviously, the internet just amplifies everything. I mean, if we were 17th century peasants, with not, we wouldn't have access to the Pope's Twitter feed, and so it sort of seems like it's the technology has sort of provided sort of the infrastructure, so we can get in our the crazy hamster wheels, but then it's also I mean, Francis really has been the best promoter and campaigner for both the progressive wing and, in some ironic sense, the traditionalist wing, right? And I think he's simultaneously growing these tumors at exponential rates, which is remarkable. I mean, would you agree that he sort of set the table for this? I mean, we wouldn't be having this without Francis, or do you think this would still kind of be there? Just I don't know. What's your take?
Yeah. Well, he's. I think he's an evil presence and force, and evil always manifests itself in confusion, distrust, division, ideology, and so yeah, I think that he's been a absolutely malignant force in the church, and whether he's actually the Pope or not, in that sense, in the sense of the evil influence, it doesn't really matter. He's done the work, and others would say that he's just. This is the kind of ideological thinking you get, like from trads, like, oh well, he's just continuing the modernism and evil of John Paul II and Benedict XVI. I mean, it's just complete insanity to say something like that.
Yeah, no, he's categorically different.
And it's also complete insanity to say that he's a good influence and he's, helping the church and building it up. I mean, he's neither of these can possibly be the case. They aren't if you just look. So yeah, I do think that's the case, and I think it's unprecedented. And there's a lot of unprecedented things that are impossible to prepare for and to really know how to negotiate. I mean, 9/11 was the first real mega example of this, which changed people's souls and mindsets and the structure of political and cultural reality, economic reality. Scandemics.
Just because
9/11.
those towers fell at terminal velocity, that does not mean. No, I'm kidding.
Well,
Carry on.
yeah. I mean, you're just dealing with a kind of sorcery by incomprehensibly evil and powerful elite.
Yeah, you've turned it the satanic liturgy of our age, the offertory sort of. And that was sort of a watershed moment in the consciousness of really the whole world on some fundamental level.
The problem with these events is what they are is they're kind of negative revelations. They're revelations. They're incarnations, anti-incarnations of evil. And so, just like with Christ, you have to be able to recognize what happened in the incarnation, and that changes your life and gives you a anchor and lens to see reality correctly. The devil can only counterfeit this, and when he gives us these anti-incarnations of evil, the duty of Catholics and all men of goodwill is to recognize what's happened, and then reject completely the gospel that's written about it. You might say the propaganda, and if you don't, if you choose to simply accept what the world is saying, what the media is saying, what the puppeteers are saying or portraying on the cave wall of our consciousnesses through the media, you are going to be compromised in a deep way, in a very deep way, and not even recognizing it.
Yeah.
And so you may think that you have the faith intact, and the practices are all, you have into integrity with all this. But meanwhile, there's colonization that's occurred, and it goes to the very core of your being, your allegiances, what you consider to be sacrosanct, what, your sense of what is good and evil, and who is good and evil. And unbeknownst to you, you're going along with a counter narrative that really serves as an idol that goes alongside your religion, and it corrupts it. And this has been continuing, and getting much more sophisticated and more malicious and effective since 9/11. We
Yeah.
see what happened there. Um, and these are, competing soteriologies about ultimate allegiance and acceptance
Yeah.
of the
Different
way the
doctrines of salvation. Absolutely. Yeah.
well, yeah. So I mean, obviously, giving your allegiance to your nation state and its agendas, and giving it almost a cosmic gloss, like this is sort of cosmic good and evil. That's exactly how the language was being used then, and it divided Catholics. And you had the neoconservative Catholics, and
Right. Yeah.
both the left and the right were pretty much in sync. And then you had a small amount of people recognizing the lies. And at this point, in 2024, almost 21, 23 years later, you have much more openness to the lies. But then by that time, we already had a lot of other false flags and psyops, and the scandemic was really the next stage. And of course,
Right.
that really destroyed the Catholic solidarity, where people were literally, giving into a kind of idol worship, um, and priests and bishops, and the whole church was shut down. Honestly, if you
Yeah.
want to
That
know
was.
where I stand on Bergoglio and why I think he's evil, aside from all the different intra-ecclesial crimes he's committed and heresies and just mockeries. He basically endorsed the COVID bioweapon and gave it a
Well, let me.
Christian gloss, and mocked those who resisted the masks and all the lockdowns. And
Yeah.
that told me that he was completely on the side of evil, regardless of how much knowledge he had. His spirit was, because this was a spirit. This wasn't just an ideology. This was a spirit that was unleashed. And the fact that he was completely possessed by it, and in fact one of its leading transmitters, shows me the evil in his heart.
Yeah. It
And
was. I was.
so
Yeah. When I was at work in my company at that time, which I'm still employed by the grace of God. I applied to a religious exemption to get to, 'cause I'm Catholic. As a way of conscience, I cannot simply take this. And they said, well, I mean,
yeah,
you're Pope, for heaven's sakes. There's no more
yeah,
Catholic than the Pope, right? So that, I mean,
right.
everybody was giving me a pretty hard time, but thank God there were a few stalwart bishops who stood up to it. But that was a tough time. I mean, I was this close to losing my job.
Yeah,
I,
there were priests who, with positions in authority, who, actively try to get people's exemptions taken away. For instance, Father Matthew Schneider of the Legion of Christ did this, and he is the consummate COVIDiot, still tweeting about the greatness of the vaccine and the insanity of anybody wanting to
oh
get it.
no, oh no,
So the betrayal and treason. So I'd like to say that what's happened here is, since 9/11, and exponentially worse since the scandemic, is uh, a kind of, um, just a cancer, or
yeah,
a pandemic of treason, because that's what you're getting. You're getting, what you're seeing here is those who have, um, care of the vulnerable and the dependent, whether in the church or the world. Um, in the face of this event, basically just betrayed all those under them for the sake of their own gain to some
Yeah, no,
extent.
they went from they were portrayed as shepherds to hirelings. I mean, essentially the our Lord's words. Yeah, no, true.
Well, and the doctor, I mean, so this, all the authorities that are meant to protect us basically, coordinatedly became, you know, terrorists and aggressors in a war against us.
Yeah, no,
And the church and the world, that's what happened.
yeah, you could kind of feel the axis of the earth shift in that during that time. It was pretty remarkable. I mean, I was, getting ready to get married at that time, and I was with my wife. I sort of felt like with her, I sort of felt like a great wave passed over us. We were just like these little, crustaceans underneath the great tempest in some sense. But I think if I had been, I mean, I felt it. I mean, how could you not? I mean, the
Yeah,
insanity, the madness of it all. But I kind of want to, I kind of want to take the conversation this way.
yeah,
Um, so I mean, obviously traditionalism, in its various incarnations and permutations right now is supposed to be, I mean, the traditionalist movement kind of has all the vices of a persecuted minority. I mean,
yeah,
it has all the paranoia, it has all the defensiveness, it has all the self-righteousness, kind of the martyrdom complex, all that stuff, and some of that is, understandable, very understandable at a human level, but obviously it's and kind of this longing for this nostalgia for kind of this mythic prehistory of a golden age of Camelot, or what, Catholic a lot.
yeah,
Yeah, golden age of Catholic a lot. But obviously all that has to be, all those excesses and deficiencies have to be, corrected. But how do we salvage it? I mean, how do we have, how do we, I mean, we need to have, I mean, in some sense, there needs to be kind of a circle of the wagons. There needs to be, I don't want to call it a Benedict option per se. That's a loaded term, but um, you know, how do we maintain kind of a defensive posture, um, and engage with all these things critically, and not succumb to, the, the vices,
I don't know. I think you first have to recognize that, like if you're in the mainstream, if you're in a mainstream parish, and there's abuses and there's a spirit of worldliness and effeminacy and just kind of ugliness and a lack of any militancy, and there's even heresy and all the bad things that can hurt your soul.
yeah,
This, none of these are directly related to the liturgy there, the Novus Ordo. It's related to the way in which it's been enculturated in a bad culture, in an ideological culture,
right,
and it's taken on the worst aspects of it. It's still at its core a grace-giving holy rite. Um, but just from that trauma of going of just going with the status quo in your typical parish, you'll then um, recognize the the goodness of the Latin Mass and the Byzantine, and you'll see, oh, that these bad things aren't here, and you might
yeah,
be tempted. You're going to be tempted at that point to become a traditionalist. And what goes with that is all these sorts of reactionary ideological tendencies that
hmm,
try to make sense of that, and the subcultures and milieu of these traditionalist communities. Not so much when you've got it integrated into the parish, like Benedict XVI wanted to have happen,
right,
and authorized to happen, because he knew the problems with both extremes. But when you have them separated, and this goes from an indult or all the way to the FSSP, and especially in the SSPX and beyond, um, you're what you don't recognize is that you're also being damaged, um, in those milieus. they're just inverted kind of flip side vices and dispositions and spirits, you might say, that are uh, superficially opposed to the things you hate in the normie parishes and normie subcultures, but but in general, like, I mean, so just to be simplistic about it, it's like, oh, well, these places don't really pressure you to have as many children as you can at every moment and have your wives not work. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. You look down upon. Well, then you go to these places, and all of a sudden, having more than three children becomes like a sign that you're an actual real Catholic. You've got the identity, you've
Right.
got your wife, they're dressing a certain way, and all of a sudden you have this kind of this play
Certain,
acting kind of thing, and
although
it's
the
all
large,
about it's LARPing, and it's all externalized, and then you start to take pride in it, and then there's a little structure of the first class, second class Catholics, and it has to do with how much you oppose and how much you act against. So you go from
well, let me,
the
yeah,
frying pan to the fire. Let me just say a perfect example of this is like, well, so in your little subculture, wives help the husband with the finances. Well, my wife has to ask my permission to leave the house.
right,
And
well,
so
okay.
I'm the ultimate. I'm the ultimate, right? I'm the ultimate Catholic because of that. My wife and I, and we know who we're talking about here.
Yeah, we know who we're talking about here. And I don't know how representative he. I mean, look, there's definitely, there's definitely a subsection of these guys who they're tired of the, we do live in a gynocentric tyranny of sorts. That's part of the, the horror of our age. And like, yeah, there's an anaphylactic reaction against that, and that results in, the Tim Gordons of the world, say his name. Um, and there's a degree of sympathy that should be that I meet with it, but yeah, it goes so overboard, and it goes through the church documents, and
Now, I've lost sympathy with this. See, this is where I've changed. Okay, I used to think, well, there's the really evil thing, which is the feminism and the Novus Ordo type of Normieism, and then there's the traditionalism, which is good, and then maybe there's some extremes in there, but really the traditionalism is where you want to go. And I don't think that anymore. I do not think that. I
well,
think that
I mean,
they're both diabolical in a sense, and it's just I've really made that
so
shift in
I
my
mean, I don't know if I can. I mean, obviously we want to be traditional without the ism. We want to be. It's like having an
no,
elite
just
school, right?
just Catholic, just Catholic, just be Catholic, and that includes all the saints and devotions and teachings that came from Vatican II. I
No,
mean,
listen, that
it's
I I would that we could live in a world, to a certain extent, where Catholic was the only was the only monarchy you needed. That like
right.
it was just you know
Yeah.
it's I mean, it's a great tragedy that we have such a proliferation of terms a proliferation of descriptors to tag on to the word, before or after Catholic. It's a great tragedy, and it speaks, and very much that's a product of it is a product of the post-conciliar. I mean, was this happening before the post-conciliar? Maybe in certain places it was. I'm not well versed enough in my history to point to specific epochs of the church, where that was occurring. I just don't have the historical literacy for that. But it does seem like, post Vatican II, there was this kind of explosion, and there were these, you know, reactions, and we don't have to relitigate Vatican II. I don't want to do that here. Um, but I think we can, that was the culprit in many ways. At least the horrible, the god awful, liturgical implementation and all that. Um, so
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I've been through the whole. I'm pretty well informed, educated on all the traditionalist literature and all that, and it's not like it's all false. But
yeah,
what I'm
no,
seeing now is the contamination of every aspect of kind of not just the Catholic Twitter sphere and the influencer sphere, but online traditionalism, but
I mean, do you
also
think?
within the milieus, it's really contaminated now by ideology,
I
and
mean,
that's what I'm
part of
seeing.
me, part of me wants to. Okay, just bear with me as I say this. Okay, I think part of me, we so much of this is. I mean, yes, online culture is certainly reflecting a lot of the realities on the ground, no questions asked. But to a certain extent, it does distort, it does amplify, it does, um, it's like you have your online presence, and that gets and those and you get distilled, you get kind of sorted out into these various flasks, these various chemical flasks where you get distilled down to like you know the you want to have the purest compound and product. And then you apply pressure, you apply heat to those, and other people are they're in their ideological flasks, right? And they're trying to work out their impurities, but then these chemicals are just bouncing into each other. And I'm not trying to. I mean, obviously this is a long-winded metaphor, but and obviously there's serious content to these arguments, on one side or the other. But to a certain extent, like the internet culture is just it's just putting this whole thing on steroids to a degree that's just like, what if we just, I can't remember, it was Michael O'Brien a few years ago. Somebody said to him, like, how do we recover something like Catholic culture, like true Catholic culture? He said, like, numero uno priority, everybody unplug from the internet. Just get off the damn internet. Now I don't know. I don't think that's okay. Pache O'Brien. I don't think that's fully feasible, but I think he's got a point. I think he's got a point that it just, it puts us in this. I don't know. Well, yeah. Any response to that? I mean, do you think
I have no idea. I can't even uh, comprehend doing that because I see it as both a lifeline to truth in an overwhelming propaganda machine. I don't know if we would have figured out what happened in the scandemic or 9/11 without the internet. On the other hand, it's also dangerous and it's toxic in many ways. Um, but
yeah,
where you're seeing the new public square is Twitter, and on X there are a lot of truth telling. A lot of truth telling is going on, and it's
yeah.
uncensored, and it's really a lot of people are awake now
I
to
don't
a
I don't
level
want
they
I don't want I
haven't
don't want to
arrived.
deny that. I don't want to deny that. I mean, I think there are. I mean, I can't be. I know I don't have the temperament to be on Twitter. I was on Twitter. I got on during the Pachamama incident, and I couldn't. I didn't have the internal temperance to
Yeah,
just to deal with it because I was getting into so many arguments. But that's me, and some people can take this drug in reasonable doses. Um,
yeah.
but I don't know. Like, part of me, like, do you think you could sit down with Mr. Big Beard SSPX at a bonfire and have a shot of whiskey? And I think you could have a far more productive conversation with him in that
Uh,
setting than you could over
I
Twitter.
don't know. I don't know because I just think people have chosen. I do think this Phariseeism is real. I do think it's a kind of Calvinist virtue signaling uh, thing where it's like you've got these
Yeah, you can.
externals, and it means that you've got these opinions, and it's just it's cartoonish and ideological and pernicious, and I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, I get it.
I
I
don't
get it.
know.
You find all the purity spirals. I mean, it has all the hallmark. It has so many of the hallmarks, right? But yeah, I just so much of me, part of me, there's a deep part of me thinks that we could, there could be more dialogos, or the dial,
Yeah,
we could engage in a more gentle, Socratic, charitable engagement, outside of these forums, and that I don't know, so much of who we are influences the online avatar, but the online avatar influences who we are in real life too. It's kind of this. It's a highway that moves both directions. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's obviously not the. I mean, obviously the internet. I don't think the internet is I think it's an amplifier. I think it takes the fuel and it tries to maximize the impact. But I think Francis he's the agent provocateur here. I
Well, I
don't.
agree. I agree. I mean, I agree. And there's a lot of this fallout from this. And
Yeah.
like I say in the
Well, let me.
article, like, go ahead. Yeah.
No, no, you go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm gonna cut you off.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I, there are some traditionalists who I thought I was on board with a year ago or so. And it related to the question of modernity, the question of looking at historical events that are sacrosanct and questioning them, like revisionist history, 9/11, other events having to do with Israel and Zionism. And, um,
Yeah.
you realize there's only a small group of Catholics who are willing to talk about these issues. All that's changed a bit in the last few months. But what happened is you know, there's there's still a kind of that's kind of a traditionalist little niche, that view. And so I have some overlap with that niche of thinking, but I also am open to other ways of understanding the church and history and spirituality, which includes, you know, certain mystics like Luisa Picadetta and Saint Faustina, and an overall positive view of John Paul II.
Yeah.
And yet, what happened is I realized that the price that was paid by these several traditionalists, James Maudsley, Theo Howard, Bill Tucker, for instance, those three, Bonday Radio, Theo Howard's thing. The price they had paid for this was to have this ideological and thoroughly schismatic and out of reality understanding where they literally couldn't see what was right in front of them. They couldn't see the holiness of Louisa and her teachings. In fact, they thought it was satanic, and they couldn't see the holiness and orthodoxy and actually immense holiness and gift of the Divine Mercy devotion. Um, and there was no
Wait a
talk.
minute, all of them to a man? All of them?
Pretty much they all are skeptical about anything that's post Vatican II, including
Right.
canonizations, including devotions that were authorized.
Okay.
So you have this hermeneutic of suspicion about John Paul II, and then because of that, you have a priori suspicion about his preferences and preoccupations, including Polish culture and the Polish Saint Faustina. And then you start giving into the whole narrative about Divine Mercy being counterfeit, being a satanic version of the Sacred Heart.
Yeah.
Okay, at this point, you're entering
Yeah. I've
into
read.
insane land. Okay,
Yeah.
insane, and it's completely insane. And what I was watching was the traditionalism of these people and others was keeping them from being able to see a very salvific gift of the church that was meant for them and all of us. And they were not only not interested in it, they were demonizing. And what that told me was like traditionalism really can be an ideology just as bad as progressivism. And it's not like,
Yeah.
well, who cares? Who cares if they don't like Saint? At least they love the mass, or at least they get the problem of Israel or something. It's like, no,
Mhm.
sorry. That
Well,
that's the typical not that's not the right way to understand this. Okay, it's
I think if you have those, yeah, I think if you have those a priori commitments, then you can't see if you can't read something like the Diary of Sister Faustina and see the sanctity of this woman. I mean, that's a very strict that's a myopia that's
yeah.
um yeah, I mean, and that you can't allow yourself to just to question your epistemic grounding.
But there's
Um,
a reason they have to have that a priori skepticism because they've already accepted the traditionalist narrative that we must be distrustful of everything after Vatican II.
right.
And that includes all the popes and all the developments of teaching and mindset. And because of that, they're not going to budge on that. Okay, but the problem is
Well,
you're
they can't.
seeing.
Right, because
Some,
if they budge and they start, they're going to put a crack in their own dam, and they're going to think, what other holes, am I not
yeah.
plugging or seeing, and then suddenly the whole thing is just this. Right.
Well, but
Uh,
how do you find out whether something is? See, this is the paradox of this. Okay, they've got a hermeneutic, they've got a lens, and they've got a certain attitude. What I realized in this was so much of what we consider to be good and true is not based on our logical analysis, um, and it's not based um, on what we argue, our arguments and our judgments. It precedes that much more. It first and foremost has to do with your trust in the authority that's giving it to you, like the ethos of the authority.
hmm.
Okay, so this is why it's so evil to go even near schism,
Yeah,
because
uh,
because
that's
if you have, go ahead.
no, 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 it's just interesting. I know that Matthew Crawford recently came out with an article, and he was talking about how in order to do education well, like implicit trust in the authority is a non-negotiable. It's completely indispensable. If you don't have that,
Yeah,
it's this collapse into individuality, actually, and you
right.
can't actually, and of course which of course is a very modern spin on the self, right? That the individual, that I stand in judgment upon, you know, like I am the arbiter, right? Um, and that's, yeah,
Yeah,
it's sort of a perverse sort of aristocratic posture, right? Where you're supposed to say, no, I'm not the aristocrat. I'm not the one who's attained excellence. Someone else has. I apprentice myself to them. I apprentice them myself to reality, which ultimately is the saints, the Lord, our Lord, the magisterial judgments of the church. These are the things that measure us.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah,
just
so your attitude has to be right, and that doesn't mean that you're Pollyannish about the church and about defects of certain popes. Okay, like, okay,
yeah,
so perhaps John Paul II, because of his conditioning and upbringing, wasn't aware enough of the dangers of ecumenism and the possibility of problems. So you had the Francis of Assisi thing and the kissing of the Quran, whatever.
yeah.
And okay, so fine. Maybe maybe personally, he had a lapse there, but that, but okay, but that's not the same as Bergoglio. First of all, it's not even close to the same thing we're dealing with here.
Well, that's not the
And
same as the Abrahamic houses and the declaration that all
no,
religions. Okay, okay.
it's not the same. And his level of, this isn't a lapse here in Bergoglio. This is a pattern of malicious undermining. There's no doubt about it. Okay, like, and that's not because I have an a priori skepticism. See, you have to kind of see yourself like, if I were to, this is what happened. Like, okay, I'm sitting there trying to deal with Father Maudsley about Louisa. Okay, and I've read a lot of the volumes. I know a lot about the history of her, and I know exactly how authentic and real and holy she is. And that's because I didn't start with a hermeneutic of suspicion about it. Okay,
Hmm.
I was open to it. In fact, I did actually start with that because I wondered, based on people I talked to who are into this devotion
Yeah.
and the gossip about it. I wondered about it, but then I started reading the
Well, you
volumes.
were probably you were just vigilant, right? You weren't suspicious. You were just vigilant.
No, yeah, I was critically minded about it, but I was willing to be open to it at some point. And then I started to read the volumes and get to know people. And but see, Maudsley begins with this former SSPX attitude of criticism and this super anti-modern, radical view. I didn't realize how bad he was until I got to talking about this issue. And he's interpreting passages in the text in a tendentious way to basically make the evidence conform with his judgment. And
Right.
he's convincing a lot of people doing this.
Well, he
I've
almost convinced.
seen him.
He almost convinced me. I mean, I read some of his. I read some of his, reviews of her writing, and I thought, oh, that does sound a little. But then I went and read, other people, and and they said, no, this isn't in context, and I kind of had to go. I had to kind of play ping pong, a little bit, back and forth just to get a feel. I haven't, I haven't read any of them. Well, I've only read, bits and snippets that are presented to me, in various
Yeah.
articles. Um,
Well, look, her writing is extreme because she's an extreme mystic, and the teaching is very high level. Okay, and it's that's the reason for the superficial resemblance to certain heretical views. But all the saints, especially the mystics, have this issue. Okay, with their writing. Sister Faustina had it. You know,
yeah,
even like the Carmelites. I mean, even Thomas Aquinas, his innovations were looked at with suspicion because there was a kind of innovation going on with the rehabilitation of Aristotle and all this, and some of his writings and doctrines were put on the index, not the index, but were forbid. What is it? Disciplined by Bishop Tempier, Paris, and anyway, the point is.
yeah.
The point I'm making about this is I'm sitting here watching this guy, and he's in his own little world here. He cannot get outside of it, and that's because he does not trust the church. Because the church has said that she's a servant of God. The church has not said any of the things he said about her writing. A saint, a very holy saint, Saint Annabel de Francia, was her bedtime like guardian for years, her confessor. Okay, he's a saint. Okay,
Yeah.
he know, and so yeah, I mean, it was the insanity of him thinking there was some kind of weird sexual perversion going on and abuse, and like there's never been any evidence whatsoever presented, not even a prima facie of this. But he's in his own world, and it's precisely because
And is
this
he just a complete
this
locked box? Is he a complete locked box where it's like if you
well,
try to,
and the reason is because of the traditionalist suspicion. Okay,
yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
so dangerous. This kind of suspicion,
Let me
you
ask you a little bit of a curveball here because I've seen
yeah.
this on various traditionalists, and I do, you know, I used to identify as a trad, and I
Well,
still,
I did too. I did too.
I mean, and once again, like I call myself trad adjacent. Maybe that's the best kind of term if I had to pit. And once again, what I don't know. Do you have to pigeonhole yourself? With these things. I mean, just I'm Catholic. Okay. Um, no, it's an interesting thing. I've been kind of thinking about, and I know some other people have touched around. This has kind of been more of a in trad land. Is obviously you have Bennett, you have John Paul II and Benedict, and they were very much formed kind of in the ethos of the preconciliar by by the Trid, by the general
Yeah,
mysticism, by the just the general warp and woof of all that, and then
yeah,
post you have Bergoglio, you have Francis, and he grew up with nothing but the Ordo. Um,
yeah,
and I mean, is there an argument to say like that Francis is almost the first true pre-Vatican II Pope in one sense, that he's completely on the other side of the fence. He didn't start out on, you know,
yeah.
his whole identity and the continuity moving forward is all Ordo for him.
No, yeah, that's interesting. But I don't know. I mean, but there is no.
I know that Ordo is, whatever. I'm just, I know that that's a tendentious word itself. I'm not, you know, I recognize that these things are messy. There's not. It's hard to sometimes. These things don't fit into neat boxes. But I thought that was an interesting observation that people have been kind of kicking around. Um,
Yeah. Well, look, I don't. I just can't look at it that way because there is no pre and post. The Vatican II doesn't represent a revolution. It just wasn't that. It can't be that, and it wasn't that. There were people
it
involved.
wasn't that. It wasn't. Well, it wasn't that on paper.
Well, and it wasn't that in terms of. I mean, if there was any revolutionary malignancy going on, it was by bad people in charge, which is
All right.
always possible. but to not make the distinction, like to think that somehow you're going to have to go Sede 58. Okay. And in my opinion is traditionalism really, uh, unless you're willing to make a lot of distinctions. Okay. That it makes much more sense to say that, um, that you had, it was a false council. It really was the Vatican II Church. This is how SSPX speaks. Okay.
Yeah.
The conciliar church, blah blah blah, and yet they want to say it's still the church because they don't want to say that it wasn't a pope, and then they say things like this: the Novus Ordo Mass is valid, but it's damaging to your soul. Okay, you can't say that. Okay, you can't say that. It's absurd to say that that the Pope, legitimate Pope, can promulgate a right to the universal church and it's damaging to souls.
Right.
That is part of the indefectibility of the church. Okay, and
Right. No,
you just can't say that, but they act that way, and they treat the Vatican. I mean, this is, I think, Peter
well,
Kwasniewski that treats the Vatican II or the Mass and all the things that's happened like this in a way that doesn't make any sense. He should just
let
go.
me. I mean, I think Peter's actually right on. I and there's no question that the bishops did not have the spine to just regulate it. That's all. They didn't have the spine to police it and say this is the fixed and final form, and there's going to be no tampering and deviating from these norms in the implementation. And they didn't do that. There was no policing. It just came out. It was vomit, and everybody, and it just took on, as you said, it just took on the garments of the 1970s. It just took on all that native color, and it's just shambled on. And now thank God there's been some, Benedict obviously was a huge leap. He was a quantum leap forward in terms of, getting clarity of language in there and getting more of the sacrificial Orthodox, language. And he was pushing for all that. He wanted the mutual enrichment, blah, blah, blah. But so much of this is simply because, as a quality assurance analyst and a cybersecurity guy, one of the things that we talk about is we talk about what's called just baseline condition. That's just what's normal in the system. You have to define normal in the system, and you have to have authority to define what's normal. Because if you don't, you can't actually detect alteration or destruction of your data in the system, because you don't know what normal looks like, and so you can't track you can't track abnormal. And the thing is, the Novus Ordo didn't have a normal, and so there was no abnormal. And I think that now obviously there was a normal. There was a normal on in Sacrosanctum Concilium, and its emphasis on the continuity of tradition, everything adhering to that. I mean, Sacrosanctum Concilium talks about tradition like 20 times. It mentions the word like 20 times. I mean, it's not a throwaway, but the fact that it just became, they threw it out there, and it just became an engine of abuse, to the point where it did develop these pockets of these.
Well, I think they're all occasions for treason. All these things that happen. The way the documents were written and how it was all came about at Vatican II, the original manuals were scrapped, and there was some strange things that happened.
Yeah, there was Bonini and so forth, but once again, I think you're right. Obviously, hermeneutic of continuity. I'm a reformer of the reform guy. I think it can be salvaged. It can, but you just need to get. I think part of it too. I just read have you read The Return of the Strong Gods by Rusty Reno?
No, I know the thesis.
You should. Oh, it's great. You would love it. But part of what he talks about is how, ever since World War II, there's been what he calls the post-war consensus, which is just like this anti-authoritarian streak, right? It's like the world saw the horrors of what happens when you have the strong men who, go to war and bring the masses with them and straight and boot jacket them into these trenches. And it was all, the academia kind of built up this myth that all authority is tyranny. All authority is tyranny, and we have to destroy the authoritarian.
That's the authoritarian personality by Marcuse, was it?
Yes, exactly. Marcuse. Yeah, exactly the same. All this literature that was very representative of all this literature that's pouring out, the church very much, those men and some, I think, and very much were influenced by that. They thought the exercise, like the exercise of authority, cannot be perceived in any way as I think it was in their own minds to a degree. I think it was just everybody was sort of traumatized from the psychotic butchery of these, the two world wars.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And they thought there was just, so what he calls it is, he calls it like there's such a commitment to being an anti-authoritarian. You see it everywhere. And it's kind of like, how do you weaken the natural loves of men? How do you homogenize? How do you break down and soften and butter over differences, because that's what causes conflict and tension and blah 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 blah. And that kind of Kool-Aid, I think, was taken by the church to a degree. So when the Novus Ordo just started being abusing, it's like, well, we can't be the police. The churches, we can't.
I get that.
Here, So anyway,
that's just a sociological analysis of the pastoral effectiveness based on a kind of pendulum swing, neurotic response.
Exactly.
From trauma. Trauma always causes this.
Right. So how do we I think the pendulum is starting to swing the other way. I think we are starting to I think we're doing. There's obviously men like the Tim Gordons of the world. There's a puerile, there's a puerile moves that direction to kind of recover the strong man, the patriarch, the man of strong loves who fights and dies for principles and things once again. But it's a lot of it's all wrapped up. It's all wrapped up in internet culture and Francis papacy and a toxic secularism that is eating everything. It's just an all-consuming black hole. So I don't. I guess we can start. How do we get out? Kind of turning back to the question. I guess the simple answer is become the saint. Work out your sainthood in fear and trembling. Conform yourself to Christ crucified. Go ahead.
Well, I think it's idolatry is the main issue, and the worst idolatry is of your own thoughts or some conceptual apparatus or a paradigm. Evaluative paradigm, and the trust issue, like what you trust and what you don't. You can't survive without such a thing. It's what we do. It's our interpretive framework, and it can more or less be accurate based on the standards that we're given in the church and in the Tao and natural law, and also just in our own experiences. And we have this thing, and you don't have to be constantly paranoid that maybe your whole paradigm's wrong or something. At some point, you do arrive at certainty and trusting of certain things, and you shouldn't be constantly worrying about that. But at the same time, you have to look and see what's there and try to hold a little bit loosely to this, because, like, again, it's recognizing what you have to trust and what you can be suspicious of.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, the latest Trent Horn thing, he's got this, there's been a whole, coordinated effort to demonize and mock and discredit Darryl Cooper, the Martyr Made podcast, who was on with Tucker Carlson talking about World War II and Churchill and then there's Candace Owens, who's recently become Catholic, and who's kind of has taken a red pill and is starting to question narratives. And the thing is, a priori, okay, what narratives and claims are you permitted to be suspicious about? Okay,
right.
And what are you not permitted to be? Morally permitted, intellectually permitted, and what's happened is you have all these.
I think there was.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's an Overton window, and I think World War II. I mean, I listen, Dad, I'm not versed in World War II. I mean, I know some things, but my history is probably that of a sixth grader. Um, I mean, but it is, there's no question that World War II sort of cemented the American empire as the definitive power in the world. And there's a mythos, there's sort of there's a mythos there that's evident. Um, and Hitler is the super duper. I mean, he's the devil. He is the devil incarnate in this. He's the supervillain in this mythos. Um, but I mean, there's no question that obviously the Germans coming out of World War One, they were suffering tremendously. The grievances there were deep from the Treaty of Versailles, blah blah blah. Like if you didn't have Hitler, you probably would have somebody else if it wasn't Hitler. I think. I mean, you're.
Well,
But anyways, go ahead. I'm sorry.
my no, I look. I want to get a bigger picture on this. Okay, myths. Um, myths are bad if they compete with the ultimate myth of which is the true myth of Christ and the church and all that that does to relativize and desacralize any kind of myth that has to do with human power and human artifice and human identity, whether it's nation or ethnicity, race, or and your own history. Okay, nobody has the right to tell you you must believe anything. Okay, except the church. The church has the right, because God has the right, because Christ has the right to tell you that you must believe this, the creed, the catechism, and it's because the person who's telling you this died for your sins and is true. And you may not see that you must, but you must. And at some point, you recognize the authority of the church, and you accept the obligation. And at some point, you don't even see it as an obligation. You just see it as reality, and you love reality, and you become less of just accepting it as right opinion. And through the gifts of the Holy Spirit, you start to have a mystical union with this knowledge, and you literally become it, and it becomes part of you. And that's what the whole process is of sanctification. But you start out with, this institution here that has authority over you to tell you what you need to believe about things that you necessarily might not be able to prove or see for yourself. Okay, the counterfeit is when some other authority and some other group decides that you're going to have to believe other myths, and when those myths compete, okay, with the myth of the incarnation, okay, nobody has the right to make you feel stupid or insane or evil if you don't buy it.
Okay.
Okay, and
Let me
so
ask you.
that's what I'm getting at here.
Let me
And
ask you a really
that
pointed. Let me
yeah,
ask you a really pointed question here. Maybe this is a stupid question. You can just. I don't know if it's a stupid question, but I mean, obviously, I don't know what exactly your view. I don't want to put you on the spot. I don't know exactly what your views on the Holocaust are per se. I do. I think there's reasons to believe it was exaggerated. I do not believe it was, all just a fabrication. I think. But do you think the myth of the Holocaust is that competing with Christ on some existential level?
well, I just want to say that you can detect when if a myth or a narrative is doing this. When okay, so how can I put this? Um,
Sorry, that's kind of a difficult. Maybe.
well, okay, the way that myths function in culture is that they become a source of unity, and if you believe in them, you have an identity and solidarity with others. And those who don't accept that myth and that paradigm and that narrative are seen as threats to that identity, and they have to be kind of marginalized or even criminalized. And
Hmm.
that happened in the church and in the Christendom, and for a good reason, because although people were free always to not believe, and but you'd be punished if you publicly promoted a competitive view that would threaten the truth. And that was why we had heretics punished and things like that.
And then we had
And
the
I
Galileo affair.
well, yeah, and all cultures do this, and it's normal and natural, and it's not unjust for a Christian culture to do the same thing as long as it's done with justice and charity for the right purposes, to protect the common good. Okay, now in the modern state where Christian truth is no longer bound up with the political and the church still does it within her own precincts, right? With excommunication and the declaration of heresies for any authoritative teachers. We still do it, right? And it's a consequence. You can lose your salvation if you're excommunicated, you're unrepentant. So my thing is, if you look closely, there are other myths that are functioning the same way, and no other myth but the Catholicism should ever function that way. Um, with that kind of ultimacy, and yet there are such things. Now, when you see that, it's either there's only two options of this. The officially promulgated myth is either true, and it's the kind of truth the the doubting of which and the subversion of which does mean uh, injustice and evil
Right.
to others. Okay, or the reason it's protected, the reason it has so much cachet and public acceptance, and is because it's precisely being used by bad people ultimately to preserve injustice in some way. Okay, and
Yeah.
that's the only option right now. You
It
have the
preserves.
right to ask,
It's to preserve
right.
injustice, and it also ties into, to kind of circle back all the way back to the beginning of this conversation. It kind of circles back to a sort of quasi doctrine of salvation too, right? Like if you believe
Well,
this,
yes, and
you know,
also it means you're a good person. So the scandemic was a good example of it. We saw this in real time. A myth was created, a narrative. It was given policing force, coercive power behind it, and if you didn't believe it, you were literally harmed, and physically even,
oh,
and certainly financially.
you were an enemy of humanity. Yeah.
Yeah, so we saw this in real time, and it wasn't because it was true. It wasn't because it was protecting people. It was the opposite. It was because it was harming people deliberately, as David Hughes shows in his book, COVID-19 and Technocracy. It was meant.
I'm gonna have to read that book. What's it
Oh,
again?
it's David Hughes. I think it's David G. Hughes. I forgot his middle initial, but he's got a Substack, and it's COVID-19 and the war for technocracy. There's actually a middle term there in the six. Some
Okay.
COVID-19, something else, and the war for
Does he use the
technocracy.
term bioweapon in there, or does he just
Oh, of course. But he calls this whole thing omni war. It's a war of every single aspect of society, and uh, every weapon at its disposal to debilitate, demoralize, and basically destroy culture, society, policy, economics, people's minds, so that they can usher in global technocracy.
yeah,
Uh, and that's the purpose of the narrative. So it's the
yeah,
opposite, right? So
it's
it
right.
presented itself as the reason you can't question it is because if you question it, people die, grandmother dies or something,
Oh, I
and
know, I
it
know,
went
I know. I
right.
it was just complete just a quick anecdote. I have a woman I work with. She's my tech lead, a very very smart, competent, intelligent woman, but she has two kids, and she said, I said, when was the last time you saw your son? She said, oh, well, he's in California. I'm here. I haven't seen him in a few years, and it's because of the COVID. I don't want to see him because I don't want to kill him. I mean, that was literally the logic. I don't want to see him because I don't want to kill him.
There are
This
a
is a
lot of victims of this.
this is a profession. This is like an A-type professional, like high
Yeah.
achieving, very intelligent woman who
It
just.
has nothing to do with intelligence. In fact, the more established you are, the worse you are off on this. But that's how it works. But the point is
So
that it turns out that believing it was wrong, and all the pressures were telling you to because it was good and you would help people. So when a myth has that much power and that much control, okay, there's, like I said, there's only two options. It's because it really is the case that if you don't believe every single word of it as coming from the authoritative promulgators of it, and they tell you what it means to doubt it because they have a whole thing, like a schema about this. It's either because it really is evil, insane, dangerous, whatever it is, or it's the opposite. It has to be the opposite. And so the one that works for this being it's evil and insane is to basically doubt and subvert and undermine the church's teachings. I mean, that is very bad to do. Um, and if you're within the church doing that, the church still treats you as an enemy, tries to get you to repent, of course, but it's still seen as really bad to do. But in culture, it could be the same with going against not so much myths, but being like, let's say you're just all about undermining any kind of sense of goodness of your own country's past leaders and events and everything, like like the left tearing down the statues and all that. I mean,
Right.
it's good to preserve a sense of patriotism and love of country. And there are people who say, "Oh, it's all myths," but their perspective is and their motivation is to destroy. That's the purpose. It's not to actually. And it's ideological, right? Marxist critical race theory and all that. Okay, so but I guess what I'm getting at here is you can detect when a myth is serving the purpose of preserving irrational, arbitrary power when it has this effect and it's colonized people's minds. So that's what people have to wonder about. And 9/11 did this. 9/11 was also a myth-making process, and I remember when it went down. And if you didn't accept America as the innocent, martyr of these incomprehensible evil people, and if you didn't hate them and want to go to war with them, if you didn't defend the wars in Iraq, you really were considered subhuman and evil. And and then of course a lot of people now see through that. But the
Yeah.
question is, if 9/11 was one of these, and if this pandemic was one of these, and if climate change is one of these, and then perhaps there are some that
And heliocentrum is one of these. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
well, yeah, I don't care much about that issue.
No, no, no. I will. Yeah,
But I
I've been
mean,
reading I've been reading Sue Genis and I find him compelling. But anyways, go ahead. Sorry.
well, no, I look, I'm open to the possibility as long as I can understand how the what the church's issue is. Look, again, it comes down to freedom of thought. I mean, do you have the moral right to think certain things about your history and about a cosmology and whatever it is? Well,
Okay.
you only have you don't have the moral right to think about certain things as true if the conclusion of those truths is against natural law, uh,
Or divine law.
absolute fundamental common sense, and the church teaching. Okay, because if your conclusions go against those things, you don't have the right to think them, especially if you know they go against those things. That now you're playing with malicious malice here because you're believing something that's not true and that you have a right to believe is true. Okay, but absent that, okay, you should have the right to question and think about stuff and inquire and
Yep.
see what the truth reveals. Well, there are certain issues that are not church teaching, that are not moral issues, that are not common sense, and that are not obvious fact. That there's immense pressure for you not to consider, and I think that's a sign of ideology and uh, a thought control. And so
Yeah.
I'll just
No.
leave it at that. I'll leave it at
Yeah.
that. And too many Catholics don't know what they're allowed to question and what they're not. And when you don't question what you should question, or at least are morally allowed to, and you feel like your own, and you have an internal censor that's like punishing you if you think about certain things. It's a sign of brainwashing,
Yeah.
and it's
It's
also a sign of idolatry. And
sort of a cult.
idolatry is the problem. Okay,
Yeah.
and
When
all
you.
the things I mentioned about the traditionalists, it's idolatry. They have some idols there that serve a purpose, of prestige and ego and identity and comfort and security and superiority, and they conflate those idols with church teaching and with common sense, and they're not willing to look and see that it's not, and that's sinful. And if we have these idols, the grace that the world needs from us uh, to stop this madness and this apocalypse, it's going to be prevented. That's the main problem. We have to start there, and that's
Yeah.
why my animus towards
Well,
traditionalism is growing, because I'm seeing much more of that in that subculture, which should know better. Which should know better.
well, right. That's yeah. That's kind of the folly of it that they, you know, yeah. I don't. I'm just hoping that it's, through this, there's going to be kind of a new catalyst, a new spark that's going to. I mean, I just kind of think of like the Arian heresy, and how Athanasius sort of rose up from the ashes of that.
Yeah,
Despite Pope Liberius and all the, all of his compromises and concessions.
yeah,
Um, and he kind of, we came forward with more dogmatic clarity. There was the triumph of the good there. So, what is it going to look like on our end? We should probably wrap up soon, but I'm
yeah,
just trying to think of how this shakes out with, there's such a deep Francis fatigue here with
yeah,
everybody. I mean, my brother's actually, he's a parish priest now, and he tells me some things in confidentiality. But he says,
yeah,
there's, even among the episcopate, in the U.S., like there's such a deep, just bewilderment and fatigue, and just people they're just, yeah. There's a lot of actic, what's it called? Actic acid in the legs when you run a
yeah,
lot, and you get the actic acid buildup.
yeah,
There's a lot
right.
of that. There's a lot of that right now. But I guess gosh, I don't know. I'm trying
Well,
to think.
I think the key is still to do good around you without being seen and without being noticed, and not caring what the influencers say. Like, just seeing what's right in front of you, what you can do that's good and loving and truthful and courageous, even if nobody but Christ sees you, and trusting that He does, and doing it for that purpose alone. Okay, and it just seems to me like more and more as things get more and more ideological, and the temptations to kind of do things for other purposes become less and less, or actually more and
Yeah.
more. They increase actually, but the key here is to recognize, be not afraid, and recognize that somehow through all this, um, the church is there, and Christ is there, and the grace is there. In fact, it's more there now. It's more available now, and I think this is where Louisa comes in. Is the gift of living in the divine will, which is a kind of level of mystical union that is unprecedented and trumps every other kind. It's available because it's what's necessary. Now, you have to want it and know that it's necessary. Well, how else would someone want this level of mystical union and know it's there, unless you were almost forced into it, because any other alternative means you're gonna fall,
So
and
you're
get
so
eaten
you're you're
alive.
you're you're saying kind of this current passion the church is undergoing, like it's giving us access to an intimate, a sort of mystical intimacy we wouldn't have otherwise. I mean, is that the thrust?
And yeah, and more pure and more humble, because uh, there's just, it's what Romano Guardini talks about in the end of the modern world, where he talks about how in the last days, love will grow cold. What's actually in the Gospels too, but uh, it'll just be like the sort of lonely Christians with this direct line with God, being able to be out in the streets, with almost no infrastructure or even ecclesial support,
Yeah, and
just
I
being
think
able to, it's being able to be just like other Christs, and it's like, it's not like you'd wish that on anyone, because it's too hard, and it's not there's nothing wrong with those ecclesial supports and the subcult, but if those are taken away, then God is asking us to go deeper, and to have I don't know,
Yeah.
a higher level, but but it's not like we're better. It's
No,
our
not at
God's
all.
going to give it to us, and the more humble and needy we are, and the more that we're like dying for it, the more that we'll be able to ask for it. And so, yeah, I think
Yeah.
and and have some humor. Keep your humor, you know.
No, absolutely. Keep the humor, keep the chin up, and become a mystic, become a mystic and a saint if you can. I recognize that becoming a mystic and a saint is not, in one sense, it has the appearance of being a retreat from the world, but ultimately it's the ultimate engagement with the world.
That's right.
Um,
Yeah, definitely.
because it's even paradoxically, I know that St. Gemma Golgani, somebody I've been reading a lot, but she had a just a, I mean, oh, Thaddeus, if you have a chance, read her story. But towards the end of her life, she starved. Our Lord said, the Lord came to her and said, "Look, there's a lot of sacrilege right now. I need somebody to offer amends and reparation for this. Would you be willing to starve to death to make a reparation for the sins of priests at the altar?" And she said, yes. She starved to death, but our Lord came to her, and she was all about, like, she tried to keep a very low profile on the DL. She hated,
Yeah.
there's a profound humility to her. She referred to herself like in the third person, like third I, like poor Gemma. She didn't want to use the I. Like, just, we're talking about a level of, self
Yeah.
abasement that just sort of
Wait a minute.
baffled.
Wasn't she a doctor?
No, Saint Gemma Golgani.
Who am I thinking of?
You're thinking
Who
of
am I
Gianna
thinking?
Molla, probably.
Oh, Gianna Molla. Okay.
Yeah, they're, those Italian girls. You can get them mixed
Oh
up,
yeah. Anyway, go ahead. Keep going. Yeah.
but she had this experience where our Lord came to her and said, you're gonna help me judge. I have this soul that I'm judging, and you as a saint are gonna participate in this judgment. um, which is in, and he said, he was, well, and ultimately Gemma pleads for mercy. The guy gets mercy at the end, because Christ
Yeah.
was gonna damn him. Um,
Well,
but
that
but
happens with Luisa a lot too, actually. And also, yeah, that was Teresa Lisieux did that too, right?
but and she's like, well, why? Yeah, she says, why are you doing this? And he says, because the saints judge the world with me. And
Uh,
even in this profound humility where you're hidden away from the world, you stand in judgment against everything else. And it's just such a
yeah, wow.
rattling, arresting.
I'd like to judge Anthony Fauci. Can I do that? Can I ask to be his judge?
Well, I think you would probably, if you were a true mystical saint, you'd probably be begging the Lord for mercy on poor
Oh,
benighted Tony.
I
You would probably
see.
be begging, I mean, you would say, Lord, my sins are greater than his, but you know,
Oh, I didn't know you couldn't wear the mask. I didn't know that.
oh shoot. Well, maybe that's a good place to end.
All
I
right. Yeah, good.
Yeah, thank you, Thad. This has been the debut for Church Gargoyle. There were other things I wanted, we should do it again. Maybe next year sometime. There's other things I wanted to kind of drill
Yeah,
down on, and there's
sure.
ways I wanted to take this conversation and kind of advance the discussion, but
Well,
there's always some.
I thwarted you, Joe. You didn't get to do that.
You
So,
did, you shut down the. It's okay. No. This is precisely what I wanted. I wanted a good rant, as Dennis Miller would say.
yeah.
Um,
Well, just say quickly what other things did you want to get into?
Oh, I wanted to talk about the status, like the true status of Pope Francis. I wanted to talk
Oh,
about.
I don't want to talk about that.
You don't want to talk about that? Okay. I
No,
wanted.
because I just can't. I can't figure that out. I'm just open to the possibility that he's the Pope and he's not. I just don't know. I lean towards that he's not because I think Benedict probably didn't resign. But how am I supposed to know that? How is
No,
anyone
I mean,
supposed to know this?
well, you're saying okay. So you're. Well, I don't want to open up a can of worms, but your article, you say, like, we can't formally determine this, but we can have the subjective private opinion that
Yes.
this guy is going against. Now, of course, your opinion really isn't private anymore, but
No, I'm not saying. Look, I'm saying you could look at the evidence and make a judgment and say, I don't think he's the Pope. But I don't say that judgment as if I know I'm
you
right. I
can't.
just think
Yeah,
that's where the evidence points to.
right.
Okay,
You
and
believe
that's
you don't
different.
know.
I don't. I think it, and I have to make a judgment because you can't just say, well, you should just accept that he's Pope unless you know otherwise. Like, I don't think that's how it works, because you can't know otherwise, and only the church determines it. And in the meantime, I think we have to be we're able to use our judgment on these issues. So I don't know. This is where I
Yeah.
disagree with a lot of people who either are unwilling to even say that he's not the Pope, or probably not, or they say they know he's not. And
Well,
yeah, I just
I don't know.
that's yeah.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I know that there's been other popes in history who have been declared, anti. I think it happened to not on a rare. God, what the hell is his name? Honorus, whatever. I know he flirted with monophysicalism, and he was condemned posthumously, not
Yeah.
during. There was other guys like Pope Liberius once again brought him up. Like he kind of subscribed for a while to like some like seemingly Arian doctrines, but it was under duress and coercion, blah blah blah. And
Well,
that's
the best Ed Mazza has the best arguments in my opinion, and
yeah. I've read some of his stuff. I mean, it's it's like some of it, I don't know. It's a bunch of it. The legal technicalities of it are. I mean, I don't. Maybe I don't have the calibrated mind to kind of, a well calibrated mind to kind of go through like some of the fair. I don't know. It just strikes me as like the common, like there's been false claimants to if Francis was a false pope or an anti pope, like first in church history, like first of all, there's usually multiple people vying, like claiming.
No, we're in an unprecedented situation. It's nothing like all the other situations, really.
So you're saying this is just sui generis. There's no
Yes,
antecedent. We don't have any.
saying
There's no referent. There's no nothing.
I mean, there's analogous reference, but nothing that's really that much like this. But I just think you're allowed to be agnostic on this issue. I just think you're allowed to, and you're allowed to say what you think of the evidence.
Well, I think that's yeah. I think that's it. I would need cardinals coming out. Like for me, I think it's a dangerous position. I think the cardinals would need. I would need cardinals coming out and saying,
Right,
we think
I'm open. I'm open to what you're saying. I mean, I'm not. I'm open to it. Like I said, I don't know if I'm right, but
okay.
I don't feel like
right. Well, I don't know if I'm right. I mean,
my conscience doesn't bother me in how I talk about him and how much I criticize him. I just don't get bothered by my conscience isn't bothering me about it, and nobody's been able to bother me about it, including Mark Mallet. I had a correspondence with, and it was kind of pathetic what he was saying. He was saying you can't even say that he's doing evil. You just have to say he's ignorant. You have to say that he's doing his best and he's
just misguided.
No, you don't have. You don't have to do that. That's dumb. Okay, you don't have to.
Yeah,
do that.
There's a difference between naivete and that's yeah.
So what else did you want to talk about?
Oh man,
I'm just curious. What was the other topics?
I want to talk about. I kind of was like, I wanted to, I mean, there's things about Ukraine and Russia that are interesting right now in geopolitics. There's, I mean, that's might be, but that's not. I mean, the heart of it. What I really want to talk to you is about how do we salvage traditionalism? How do we be good? How do we be good Catholics? Who live and imbibe the tradition without becoming.
Well, we talked about that.
Yeah, we did. And you gave how do we be self-critical? How do we engage in inquiry? How do we not wed ourselves to a paradigm and not see the data in front of us? How do we how do we in short, how do we acquire wisdom? David Bentley Hart has a beautiful line I read the other day. He said, ultimately wisdom is acquiring innocence at the long end of experience, which is just such a beautiful summary. Of course, he's coming from a Gnostic madman now, so it's hard.
That's why I don't take what he says seriously anymore. So.
Come on, Dad. You can.
Anybody who thinks that there's no eternal hell is really, really off, in my opinion. Like whatever else he says, like that is so off to think that. Like that's so obviously the case that hell's eternal. Like I don't know. I just think he's a spiritual moron.
But you can't take the. I mean, the man is a genius, though. He's collapsed under the weight. He's collapsed under the weight of his own brilliance, like a neutron star, collapsing into itself. But
I just think people should be discredited when they have really, really, really bad fundamental views about the faith, and that is such a basic understanding of everything. If you're wrong on that,
this was the other part. This is the other part. Well, this is the other, this is a whole different discussion, but I read David Bentley's Heart book on apocalypse and tradition, actually, which I thought was in, he had some really interesting things to, I mean, I know look, poor David. I pray for the man every day. We got to pray for his eternal.
Good, you should. That's good.
Well, we're praying for him. But he had some really interesting, well, just some, there's some interesting text there that I would love to talk with you with sometime. It's on traditionalism, the nature of revelation, the nature of, the triune God as it interrupts human affairs, some interesting stuff, and how that relates to maybe some geopolitical stuff. But once again, those are huge topics that we just can't really tell. So we've almost been here for what? I can't see how long this has been going.
6:40.
Oh my gosh, yeah, we're about an hour, and I think we're like an hour and 30 minutes in.
Well, I'll put this. If you send me the recording somehow and drop it, I could put it on my Substack too. So I'll just link to yours or something.
Okay. Well, we had a little bit of a rocky start. I didn't get your joke. It fell.
Did you get it now?
Reminiscing with people I don't
Listen,
know.
Steve Wright comes out onto the stage, right?
Okay. All right.
I like to reminisce with people I don't know.
It's kind of funny. It's abstract. Yeah.
And he also said he just found out that his great grandfather on his mom's side died tragically as a child of leukemia.
Okay, that's fun.
Yeah, I got to laugh out of that one.
Yeah, that's a chuckle. He was one of the greats. I've only seen some of his material. I've only seen a little bit of his material, though. I haven't seen, a lot.
He also likes to skate. He likes to skate on the other side of the ice too.
What, you didn't like the comic with Duder, whatever the hell his name is, and Trent Horn? You didn't like that? That was kind of funny.
The what? I didn't watch it.
You didn't watch it? No, Thad. Go. Come on.
Okay.
Be a bro. Just watch it.
All right, I will.
All right. I love you. I'll let you go.
Well, God bless you, man. We'll talk again.
We'll talk again next year sometime.
All right, whenever you want. Okay.
Oh, all right. We'll have a part 2. All right. Love you, man. Take care.
All right. See you. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.